Hello, I believe we are live here. Hello, everyone. Welcome to today's live webinar. I'll wait a little bit for everyone to join in. But to introduce myself, my name is Kyle Lucas. I've done these lives before. It's been some time actually, so it's really nice to be back. Hope to see some familiar faces tonight. But yeah, my name is Kyle Lucas, and I am a member advocate here at Ocd. So, member advocates, we get paired with you actually when you start therapy with us. Kind of like you get matched with your therapist, you also get matched with a member advocate team. Um, and so I have a partner, and we're kind of with you throughout therapy, in case you need anything, really. Kind of having someone who really understands, who has OCD. I do have OCD, and I've struggled with many different themes, which is what brought me to therapy here, which was life-changing, of course, very easy to say now. But I get to kind of talk to other people who are coming into therapy and maybe don't know what to expect. And throughout the journey, if there are ever problems or you just don't know who to go to for something, your member advocate is here for you. We want to make sure that you are doing well overall. No worries. Don't anyone ignoring those messages, Rebecca, that's funny. It is us. Some messages are automated, but it is coming from us, and right when you do message us back, we will be with you, in real life person. So thanks, Jessica. Okay. So that's a little bit about what I do here. And as a member advocate, I've been with NoCD for about 2 years. I've struggled mostly with mental OCD, mental compulsions, which we know can get very tricky, very hard to see, not as tangible. So that's kind of what my experience has been with it. And I mean, I've been in a great place, ever since therapy and, getting here to talk to you guys, which is great. So just a little bit about my background, and I would love to get started on questions. So, any questions you have, whether it feels scary to ask or, I know there's a lot of uncertainty here. OCD does not like uncertainty, but please, ask any questions that you're thinking. I know a lot of things can be very difficult to discuss, and also just to share with others, but I can probably speak for everyone here that, we're all very welcoming and understand, all the different types of thoughts and scary things, that OCD can attach to. Okay, so let's see here. So our first, let me see. Okay. So have POCD. Okay, so it's just anyone who doesn't know, that's pedophilia type, like obsessions, those type of thoughts. Notice certain words trigger me, or certain videos on TikTok, people catching predators, etc. My brain always makes me think, what if I become one? Feel uncomfortable when that happens. Why? So that's, I mean, to be honest, I'm sorry that you're going through this. It's terrible. I've experienced some of that as well, those type of thoughts, and they're just so scary and just unsettling. And so with OCD, generally, all the different fears and thoughts, intrusive thoughts, those are all going to make you feel uncomfortable. And that's why, it'll be kind of classified as OCD. And there's actually a term called ego dystonic. I'm not sure, how many of you have heard that, but OCD is ego dystonic, which means that essentially these thoughts, these feelings are not matching up with like your heart or your kind of, your true self. So that's what creates that disconnect with OCD. And then there's this internal battle, that you're kind of going through with yourself of, well, what about that? What about that? What if I am that person? What if I could be that person? And then it just, compulsions, it spirals. So yeah, so it's very, not reassurance, but that sounds like classic OCD, very normal. There's, you have triggers that make you very anxious, and then all of a sudden those will spark compulsions, and then you will fall into rumination, or really any other, Googling anything else that can come along with that. So I hope that answered your question. But again, I'm sorry you're going through that, and I hope that, you're able to get help, or, are currently getting help, because ERP did change everything for me, and I know it can work as well for you. So yeah, if you have more questions, please ask. Okay, OCD is a nonstop battle. Yes, it can be. I've had some really good breaks, though, I will say, when I put in a hard work. Hello, Eduardo. Thanks for joining. Okay, yeah, so I like this. I'm constantly fighting to make it through the day. Thankfully, ERP is on my side. Yeah, absolutely. And I used to get so angry when I would be triggered, just so upset, just like the fact that it was happening and I had to kind of work through these emotions. But through ERP, what I've really tried to do is focus more on the opportunity. Looking at it as like, okay, I'm triggered right now and I'm anxious, and it might take a moment, for that to kind of happen. And then pull yourself up to bird's eye view and be like, hey, this is exactly why I learned ERP. This is exactly what I've done before. But it can feel so shocking in the moment. But if you can kind of pull yourself up and then say, no, okay, OCD, you're calling it for what it is. And you're like, oh, I've done this, exposure before. I'm going to go do that. Or I have this phrase that I say that works. And you just try to implement it immediately, because ERP is definitely on your side. Okay, let's see here. Okay. Okay. My OC is triggered so bad this week. The JD show, so the Jeffrey Dahmer show, I'm assuming, on Netflix has not made me well and hasn't even seen it yet. And I haven't even seen it yet. So that also triggered me pretty greatly, just because I do have harm OCD, and have just, experienced those type of really scary, intrusive thoughts. And that's basically Jeffrey Dahmer and a whole, even hearing the name is a little triggering, it always has been for me. But hey, it's uncertain, and it's good to kind of face that. I actually watched the trailer for it on Netflix because I knew it's not something I like or want to watch, even regardless of OCD. But obviously, I have harm OCD, and so it's a big trigger, and I know that. So I actually purposefully watched the trailer, and I didn't like it, but it was really nice to be, again, opportunity to expose yourself. I don't want to watch the show. I could as a really big exposure probably, but I thought the video was enough for me to kind of face it and be like, yeah, this is what it is, and then kind of move on. So I agree, though. That stuff is just very, very difficult, especially for OCD, depending on your theme. Huge trigger there. So sorry that you're feeling that way, and hope that you're, maybe learning some ERP so that you can kind of confront that. Edwin, I'm sorry to hear that your OCD getting triggered. I hope there was something that you were able to do to kind of work through that. Okay, let's see. Kendall, that's okay. So a couple of people are talking about our member advocate messages. So they can look like a little automated at times, but they are coming directly from us, your member advocates. So we are there. We're always there to answer questions and kind of get to, as soon as we can to help out if you do have any questions or concerns. So yeah, definitely feel free to reply to those. We will answer you back, real humans. Okay. Let's see, Hannah. Hello, Hannah. Dealing with suicidal OCD. I'm sorry to hear that. It's transformed itself into convincing myself that I am suicidal because all of my thoughts go to suicide. I'm so anxious 24/7. Advice. So suicidal OCD was one of my main themes, actually. I consider it a part of harm OCD, like self-harm, so mine actually started with that. And it was so scary. Like I was scared of absolutely everything, like even like essential oil near me, just because it's toxic. It's like little things like you just start getting really worried about. I know it can really attach to everything. So I'm sorry, Hannah. But it does. It sounds like OCD. Are you by chance in therapy? Or are you thinking about it? Because ERP is what I would say is that would really allow you to face it head on, so that those thoughts aren't 24/7. That's how it was for me. And it was debilitating, of course. I can imagine just exhausting and not being able to focus on anything really in your life. That's what OCD does. It pulls you from absolutely everything, and it sucks, So yeah, I would be interested. Are you trying ERP? Okay. Let's see. Okay. Hello, John. Okay. How do you deal with compulsions to ruminated questions that feel very nagging to answer? Like a question will come up and it's very nagging to answer, but just causes me to analyze to death. Yeah. So, this does sound purely like rumination. Rumination was one of my main themes, actually, just because mental and just that was really all I did was ruminate all day long. But essentially, yeah, rumination is your compulsion. And then rumination, it'll bring up a million different thoughts. So that's the thing is like, say for harm OCD, say, it prompted by the Jeffrey Dahmer, trailer. And I watched that and it triggered me. And then all of a sudden, that was kind of the fear. And then maybe there was a question, some sort of what if in there, of course. And then all of a sudden I'm like, well, this and that, and because of this, and trying to like connect dots and make sense out of things. So that's all rumination. So that's just kind of, you're just in the depths of that compulsion itself. And it's probably going to bring up a million other questions and a million other things because it's trying to solve a problem. That's what OCD is always trying to do, is solve a problem, get an answer, find a solution so that you could relax. Compulsions are meant to try and find that answer, but they never really do because it's not possible, because you can't find certainty. So that's really the whole cycle there. So I'm sorry that you're in that, because rumination is very hard. You don't even know you're doing it half the time. At least I didn't. So it's very negative, which is causing me to analyze to death. Yeah. So analyzing is rumination. So with ERP, what you're doing there is response prevention. So you are working to resist compulsions. For whoever isn't familiar with ERP, it's exposure, which is, trigger yourself purposefully, and then response prevention, which is stopping, resisting those compulsions, because those are what is fueling the fear itself. So the goal is to stop the rumination, which I know is very difficult. And that's where ERP comes in, and your ERP specialist would be able to really guide you and teach you. This is, these are techniques that you can use. This is how you can get out of the cycle so that you are not analyzing to death. So there's definitely things that that can be done, John, for sure. Okay. Okay, so this is a hard one. Doreen, thanks for asking. So I think I mean, OCD, mental health in the workplace is always very difficult, very touchy, I think, especially depending on where you work, how your environment is, how the culture is. But how do you tell someone you may be late to meetings because of your OCD? So if it were me, I think this would come down to having probably some sort of, say it was my manager or something. It's like I think would want to, if I felt like it was impacting. Sorry about that. I think I just lost you for a second. Hopefully you all are there. I think my Wi-Fi just went out for a moment. But so when it comes to work, I think if if you're able to speak to your manager openly, I think that's where I would begin. Just to say, hey, this is something I'm going through. Details or not, whatever that relationship that you have is, but you can kind of let them know what you're going through, and that sometimes it makes things harder, and kind of list off a few things that it's difficult for you, but you're trying your best, you're in therapy, whatever those cases might be. But I think that's probably what I would do. It's very hard though, of course. I understand that. I think it depends on who you want to share that with, who you want to even know that you're going through this. And but I think as long as you have one person, whether that's a manager or someone, a partner who can understand and kind of help you navigate that, that would be my advice. I hope that helps, Doreen. Okay. Mohammed, hello. Are OCD medication addictive? Well, with OCD, there's not really certain specific medications that it's like, oh, this is just for OCD. This is great for OCD. Unfortunately, that just doesn't really exist right now. There are medications that have proven to help OCD symptoms. And so, that's where certain SSRIs, antidepressants, anti-anxiety, any of those, I don't quite know if those are addictive per se. I mean, I know you can't just start them and just stop them, because that's dangerous for you. But sometimes, I mean, just to be completely honest, when I was going through OC at the worst, before I really knew, I was just having panic attacks every day, I got prescribed Xanax. And that's addictive. I was actually very nervous. Because I was taking it every day because I had to, because I was so on edge. It barely even did anything, honestly. It took the edge off barely. But that's super addictive. And that was actually one of my, I think OC started attaching to it a little bit, and I started getting worried, am I addicted? Will I be? Could I be? And it just started this whole trail because Xanax and opioids, whatever, is all in that kind of group. Those are all, Klonopin, Valium, those can be addictive. So yeah, I think it depends for sure. I know a lot of people who are on medication in conjunction with therapy, and it works really well. I know a lot of people who tried medication and it didn't work well. I'm one of those people. I tried a few SSRIs, did not work well for me, unfortunately. But ERP is what really changed everything. So Okay, I'm sorry to hear that, Martini. I'm glad that you're doing a little bit better. Okay, so here's a follow-up question. Also, which is more effective, therapy or medication? I'm not a licensed clinician. I'm not, in the medical field, but just as a person with OCD who, speaks to people with OCD all day long and has been in this industry, I would say therapy. Because to me, again, personal opinion, medication, you are subduing symptoms. You are not getting to the core problem. ERP therapy, you are attacking the foundation, so like this is why anxiety is happening. This is why depression is happening. This is why the panic is happening. So you're attacking and challenging the core. Whereas to me, medication isn't ever going to the core. It's kind of floating above and trying to help with symptoms. But, that doesn't really solve the problem in the end. Now, again, that's just my personal opinion, because I do know, there are people who the anxiety is too high. And I know that. And I know that, their therapist, or they might be also working with psychiatrists, and, they kind of collaborate. It might be like, all right, we do think it's best for you to be on this medication while you're doing ERP, because it will allow you to actually work through the anxiety. So it gets very tricky. Everyone's different, of course. It's going to really come down to you as a person, but yeah, it's a hard decision. But I will, ERP all day, forever. You're hitting the core, and you can really change your life that way. And then not be taking, a pill every day, which I know no one really wants to do that. I mean, if it helps you and that's the way it is, awesome. Like I would do the same thing probably if it worked for me. It just didn't, but yeah, something to think about. But ERP can work for sure. Okay. Corey, hello. I'm just having a tough time with my sensorimotor blinking. Had it for about a year. Suggestions. I'm sorry to hear that. I know that's, I don't know if everyone's familiar here, but sensorimotor is, a kind of part of like the somatic type of theme with OCD, like being obsessed with certain like bodily functions or movements, and just being unable to kind of disconnect from that. I've had a little bit of it actually at certain times, which it's scary. Of course, you just, again, are enveloped in something that you don't want to be. So my question first for you, Corey, is have you tried ERP therapy? Because that would be my main suggestion for sure. So yeah, let me know. Okay, Suki, hello. I've been obeying OC for years. How do I start thinking I can fight it? I'm so sorry to hear that. I remember feeling like OCD, like I had to listen to it in a way, which is kind of sounds weird, but it felt like, I describe it as like, it felt like an injustice. Like if I wasn't asking the questions, I wasn't ruminating, I wasn't trying to like solve the problem, I felt like that was actually worse for like society, because what if I am a dangerous person, or what if I am a bad person, and I shouldn't be allowed in public, and it's like you feel like you have to obey, and you're kind of really under the pressure of the OCD to do certain things. How do you start thinking you can fight it? Well, I would say a little hope might be first to start, and I hope I can give that to you, because there is so much hope to get better. I mean, I was in the darkest place of my life before therapy. And I truly, complete honesty, did not think I was going to make it. I just didn't know what the rest of my life would look like if it even happened, And I mean, I just didn't believe that I could get better at all. But it got so bad that I just felt, okay, I'm either going to like get locked away, or to be honest, like die or something, or I'm gonna try this ERP therapy that people say works. That's what brought me into therapy. That was, one of the three options. And I just was like, all right, I guess I should give myself like a slight chance, and here I am, getting to talk to you all. So it's really wild to kind of look back at all that. And so that's, I'm trying to give you hope there and encouragement, because you can be in such a bad place, and all of a sudden you start learning and practicing certain things, and then your perspective changes almost out of nowhere. Like you don't even realize, and all of a sudden you're like, wait, that isn't bothering me as much as it used to. And it's like incredible. And it takes time, it takes energy, but OCD does too, as you know, as most of you know, OCD, I mean, it runs your life, most of the time. And so, you do have to dedicate a lot of time and energy to ERP, but you're now doing it for a purpose. It's like you're putting in the strength and fear and anxiety, but in the hopes that ERP is going to change it in the end. Whereas when you're just stuck in compulsions and you're not in therapy, OCD just going round and round, there's really nowhere else for it to go besides kind of sit with you. Whereas ERP, it takes a lot of work, but you're already putting in a lot of work, honestly. And you don't realize it, but you really are. So there is so much hope, Suki. And I would say give us a call. So on our website, book a free call and just check it out. Take one step at a time. I know it can be overwhelming, so no pressure, but make a call. Even if you're not ready to schedule, you learned a lot, you took that step. Maybe a week later, you're like, I'm feeling ready, and then you can book an appointment. And there's so much help, and I just don't want you to feel like there's, like it's not possible, because it definitely is. And I think that you can do it for sure. People with OCD, we're all very strong. We don't really realize it because we're just being burdened and inundated all the time. But the fact that we can keep up with it, and work through it while also still pretty much living lives at times. I know sometimes you just can't function. But a lot of times you're still getting out there. You're still seeing friends. You're still working, unless it just got very debilitating, which again is very normal because OCD is. So there is a lot of opportunities, Suki, and for everyone, but definitely give us a call. Okay. Jalissa, hello. What does your recovery look like? So yeah, so this was what, probably almost 3 years ago now, 2.5 years ago, I started therapy here. And I was in therapy for 3 months, like very consistent. I did twice a week for the first few weeks, which is recommended. That just shows the best results. So that's what you would want to do, twice a week initially. And then after a few weeks, you can drop down to once a week, because it's also good to be more on your own. Because you want to feel comfortable on your own. Like, I can handle this, not like, oh, I have to have my therapist here or else I'm not going to get through this. That could be another compulsion, so you want to separate at a point and say, okay, I can handle this, so that was kind of my 3 months of therapy. I had good times where there was like a light at the end of the tunnel. I was progressing, and then maybe I went straight back to square one and felt terrible again. I mean, that happened a few times, because OCD is a pattern and you're working really hard to break that pattern. So it makes sense that it's going to keep pulling you back to that old pattern. I kind of look at it as like a tug of war, because you're working to get to this different place, but you are being pulled back into this place that you've been in for so long. So it's hard, and it's very normal for you to keep getting pulled back there. And that's why practice, ERP and exposures. The more you practice and the more you're consistent, the more you are showing up for yourself. And, because you think about it, if I'm scared of a knife, well, if I hold a knife every single day and it is what it is and I can resist my compulsions, well, it's going to hit a point where this knife isn't going to mean anything to me, But if I'm holding this knife once a week and I'm just hoping for the best, well, it's most likely not going to do too much, because it's not enough time for me to adjust to it and to feel acclimated. And it's going to take a lot longer for that knife to mean nothing to me. So I say that because practice and consistency, if you take anything away from me, that is what I always preach, is practice and consistency with the tools that you say in your head, with doing actual exposures when you feel you should or need to, or it could help. So that leading into recovery, I think because I practiced so much and I did worst case scenario, if this is my fear, all right, let's blow that up and let me confront this, which is even worse. I just tried. And the benefits, I came out and I felt so great. Those fears and like worries just were so far off now. And that doesn't mean that thoughts don't ever come to your head or anything, but when they do, it feels like casual, to be honest. It's like, oh, scary thought, gone, whereas OCD, scary thought stays forever, and you can't like move past it. So that's kind of what happened. And for about 1.5 years after therapy, I was feeling amazing. I mean, I would do exposures once in a while if I hit a rough patch, which wasn't often, to be honest. But a lot of stuff in your head, because besides exposures, there's many tools and techniques, phrases, ways to kind of respond to OCD, to diminish it, to not engage in compulsion. So staying consistent with all of those things. But to be honest, almost was that a year ago now? Yeah, like about a year ago, I hit like a really rough spot in my life. Just a lot of stressors, naturally, like outside of OCD, just your normal life stressors, which we all go through that. Maybe a family member dies, maybe you're in a breakup, maybe you lose your job, all these things happen. And on top of having mental health and OCD, it's like trigger, 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 stress. And so that happened to me about a year ago. I just and then inundated with OCD again, and I was really surprised and shocked and like scared again, and it felt like it did all over again. I was like, I can't believe this is happening, because I came so far, and it was really sucked, obviously, and I was like, all right, well, you know what? I gotta just get some help again. I tried on my own and I wasn't feeling motivated to get better. So I was like, okay, I'm gonna get back in with a therapist and just see what happens. And I did. And within like a few sessions, I had new tools and new things to apply to what I was going through at the time. And within like a couple months again, I was like back at it, back feeling like myself. So that's been my recovery. And then so since then, I just stay consistent with practicing certain things, really confronting fears, worst case scenarios, like, oh, OCD, you want to throw that at me? Well, what about this? Which allows me to let things go easier. If you're familiar with certain exposures and in ERP, if you are in it, there's just so much that can just help get you through. But yeah, I've been pretty good since then, and so it's definitely a roller coaster, but I think you can really manage it rather easily, I would say, if you stay up on ERP and if you practice it when something starts bothering you. I kind of say when it's sticky, when something's sticky and you just feel like, okay, I did a little response prevention, but here's the next day and I'm still thinking about this. Okay, I need to do a real exposure. I'm going to set out 30 minutes of my day. This is the script I'm going to write, or this is the video I'm going to watch to trigger myself. And we're going to get through this, So I do that and it really helps. Yes. Thanks, Jalissa. That's a good question. Okay. Hello there. So I'm struggling with relationship OCD. I always have a fear that I'm not in love with my girlfriend, or as if her and I aren't meant to be together. Does OCD make you feel as if you don't love your partner? Yes. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think, I don't want to provide reassurance. Whoever's familiar with reassurance, but yeah, ROCD, I mean, I think that that's like a big, I've experienced it with more so like friends and family, not so much like, an intimate partner. So I haven't, experienced it in that type of way. But I think that, from what I hear from a lot of people, that's pretty much what it is there's, all these different what ifs and doubts and, is this the right thing? Is this, the best for me? Are we the best together? Do I even love them? I would say that's like a lot of the times that is kind of the core fear of it is, oh, well, I don't like this about them. Does that, so should I not be together? And it kind of all usually leads back to that same thing. So yes, I would say so. I'm sorry that you're experiencing that. OCD is just so unfortunate because it attaches to all these things that you love and care about, actually. That's what OCD does, which is so interesting, but that's why it's so stressful. Because, if it's like, okay, well, if my relationship is important to me and now it's being attacked, there's going to be so much anxiety that occurs, and then the rumination, the spirals. So yeah. Okay. Danny, hello. How do you deal with ruminating? Mine is mostly mental OCD. Ruminating is such a hard one because you don't know that you're doing it a lot of times. And that was something that I actually spoke to my therapist about when I got back in last year and you know what she said? She was like, you're never going to not ruminate. You're never going to not do a compulsion. But the point is that you catch yourself eventually, So it's like, I might be ruminating for 30 minutes and just really getting down into it. And then all of a sudden I'm like, oh my gosh, I've just been spiraling and it's been 30 minutes and I don't even know. And then I'm like mad at myself. But instead of being mad at myself, what I do is I'm like, hey, I ruminated for 30 minutes, but I'm stopping now. Like it had its time, but now that I realize I'm stopping. I'm using this ERP technique, or I'm going to do an exposure actually right now because I'm just sitting at home and I have the time. So again, holding yourself accountable, but it's going to come down to ERP, Danny. So I'm not sure if you've ever tried or anything, but there's just so much that you can learn, so many tools to deal with those mental compulsions. There's actually this great article that I would like to share with you all. Again, I'm not a licensed clinician, and I can't advise how to use ERP or anything like that ever. But this is a great article that a therapist passed along to me. Make sure that's sent through. Hopefully that's sent. So it's very nice because it's like in layman's terms, and it breaks down different ways that you can respond to intrusive thoughts. But it just is very like digestible, and it explains like why one is good for you and why, something may be bad for you, more like a compulsion. So yeah, anyone in here, I would definitely take a look at that, because even someone who's been, in therapy and everything, it's just such a good reminder. And you're like, okay, that's right. That's something that I could do. But yeah, it's best to work on ERP with a professional, of course, and a specialist, because it can get complex, when you're trying to practice certain things. I tried ERP on my own before coming into therapy, and I will say I wasn't quite doing it right because I didn't understand how to resist compulsions, or even actually what compulsions I was experiencing, because a lot of times they fly under the radar, especially mental ones. But yeah, I hope that article helps you, Danny. But again, I can't advise how to use those, but that's what exists, that I really like. But I highly suggest getting into therapy if you can, ERP for sure. Okay. All right, I do want to touch on this one because I think it's important. Jalissa, I know you had a question earlier before as well, but this is a good one. How do you give yourself compassion when you have POCD thoughts? So that is those pedophilia type thoughts, which of course, is disturbing and upsetting and scary, just very worrisome. I know I just felt like a dangerous person. Like, I can't believe that I'm even thinking something like this. Like, that just in itself means I'm terrible. But what I realized is, like, it doesn't. There's so much bad in the world, and, we think about things, not to reassure, but thoughts are thoughts, and that's actually what ERP really teaches you, is that thoughts actually don't mean anything. They're just happening, and actually most of the population has intrusive thoughts, but they don't affect them the same way that they affect someone with OCD, and that's why OCD is what it is. But Jalissa, so I understand, because when this all first happened to me, I just was so devastated and just felt like I was the worst ever, and I could never like love myself again. But what I realized is that, I had to start acting out of my values versus my fears, and realize that, thoughts are thoughts. And this is something that people go through, and that you can get help with. And I didn't think I could ever like jump over that hurdle of like feeling for myself again in like a good way. But going through ERP allowed me to get there. So yeah, I'm not sure if you are in ERP right now, Jalissa, but that's what allowed me. I would just say I went through that. So, if you're not in therapy right now, just so you're not alone in that. It's a terrible feeling. And it's so hard to share with anyone. So you feel even more alone. Like, you have like these like deep, dark secrets like on your shoulders. And it's like, I know they feel that way, but once I shared them with my therapist for the first time in that first session, 3 years ago or whatever, it just felt like such a burden was lifted. Before she even said anything, before we did anything, I just was like, well, I said them. That was an exposure in itself, right? Because I had kept them in for so long, which makes them more meaningful, which fuels OCD. But Jalissa, I just want to say you deserve happiness, and you deserve to live a happy life where these thoughts aren't overtaking and making you feel like you're not a good person, in your heart. And so we're all here for you. I understand, how that feels, and I know that you can get better. So at least I hope that gives you just a little hope, to get in with a therapist, and ERP specifically, because They're going to understand, all of our therapists here at OCD are ERP specialists. But you deserve happiness. You do. And that will allow you to get to, a better place there. But ERP can get you to get your self-compassion back, because I know I lost it completely when this was happening to me. But we're here for you, Jalissa. You're not alone. All right. I know there's a lot of questions, everyone. I'm trying to get through them. So I know there's ones I'm not going to get to, but let me just take a quick look here, make sure things are still happening good. Okay. Where am I? All right. Okay, Angel, I have been struggling with relationship OCD pretty bad the last couple days. So bad, in fact, my anxiety is making me literally nauseous. But every time my boyfriend comes around, I get nauseous and I feel awful. Yeah, I'm sorry to hear that, Angel. That sounds like classic OCD. It sounds like you're getting physical symptoms from the anxiety, which I used to as well, and it sucks because it makes it feel even more real. And then your boyfriend is the trigger here, so anytime he's around or you see him, those feelings are coming even stronger, which is terrible because you're trying to enjoy time or be appreciative or be in the present moment, and OCD completely takes that away. So I'm sorry that's happening. I do know it can get better though. As I've been speaking to ERP specifically, can help you confront these different thoughts so that your anxiety can relieve, which then will relieve those other physical symptoms and the nausea and being able to be around your boyfriend without feeling anxiety or so much or such intense. But I'm sorry that you're going through that. And I would say, try to get into therapy if you can. We're here for you. Okay, let me see here. I'm sorry to hear that, Selena. If you do know any ERP, any tools, I would give that a try. I know you're saying you don't know what to do anymore, but if you have not tried therapy, I think that would be the next step, is what I would say. When I got to that point where I just didn't know what to do anymore, that's kind of what really forced me to get in, honestly. It's such a difficult decision to make. And I would have a day where I'm like, oh, I'm actually feeling okay today. But then the next day it's terrible again. I'm like, I need to get ahead of this, So if you do know ERP, try to do an exposure or something like that. If you haven't, please give us a call and, our team can talk to you more about it and hopefully get you connected with a therapist, because ERP is what can really get you out of this. Okay. Let me just take a look. Okay, Ryan. Okay, how do I find an OC therapist that takes my insurance? Yeah, for sure. So what I would do if I were you, I'm going to recommend us just because I know our therapists are amazing and the therapy itself is life-changing. That's why I'm here, of course. But we can verify your insurance. So essentially you would call in, you would just kind of have like a 15-minute call, get the details and learn more about therapy. They'll help you find a therapist that may be in network with whatever insurance you tell them. And then essentially what would happen is that they can schedule that appointment. Say the appointment's scheduled like a week out, and then you upload your insurance. Our billing team will review your insurance within like 2 to 3 days of your upload. And then they'll get back to you, send you an email and talk about your benefits and, whether you're covered or not. And then you would be able to know and make your decision from there. Okay. All right. Hello there. How do you know you have OCD? Well, I would say that's like $1 million question. Because what I would say is, at least everyone I've ever met and myself, with OCD, there's always that doubt of, is this actually OCD? Do I actually have OCD? Or am I schizophrenic? Am I, bipolar? Am I this? Is it that? Or am I just a bad person? It's so tricky because OCD attacks itself, which is not funny, but kind of funny, right? In that like the condition itself doubts itself, in your mind. And it's like, come on, can I have a break? But OCD, what I would say is like maybe get a little bit familiar if you haven't already with the different blogs we have on our site that talk about the subtypes. I think that would be most helpful to give yourself a foundation of, okay, these are kind of what exists out there, what people talk about. different subsets, different content that they surround. And then you might be like, okay, that actually, I resonate with that. Like that's something that I do, and I never thought other people do it. It could be very eye-opening. So I suggest going onto our website, go to the education section, and take a look at some of those and see kind of what resonates with you. A lot of people have OCD tendencies versus truly having OCD. Now, when it comes to being diagnosed with OCD, it comes down to the amount of time generally that it's taking you. So these different obsessions, worries, and compulsions, how much time are they taking you? Are you thinking about this thought once a day for about 5 minutes, but then it goes away, but it might come up the next day? Or is this thought coming to you and you're sitting on it for 4 hours until you feel better? And then the next morning you wake up and anxiety about the thought again, and your whole day is enveloped in that thought. That's where you get into the OCD realm. So that timing, because a lot of people do have tendencies of OCD, but in regards to truly being diagnosed and for it to like be a true issue or condition, you could say, unfortunately, that's it's really that time frame that you're spending on compulsions and obsessions. And then if you are unsure, if you feel like you think, because I didn't know, and that was actually a big fear too, is like, am I just a bad person or do I have OCD? So that's another scary thing getting into therapy, is like, is this therapist about to confirm that I'm a terrible person or diagnose me with OCD and give me a treatment plan? Which is scary. And I know that's scary, and that's what holds a lot of people back from starting therapy. And I totally get that. But I would say if you can do it, if you can really jump over that hurdle, you're doing yourself justice, because you're getting clarity no matter what. So if you're really unsure, but you may think, I would say schedule a session with us, a first session, because you don't have to schedule further than that. Actually, you're not really locked into anything. So you can schedule your maybe first 2 sessions, which are more like the diagnostic, intake kind of clinical sessions, where your therapist really understands what you're going through and provides a diagnosis. And say they diagnose you with general anxiety or something completely different. They would help you with referrals of, actually this therapy. Okay, let's see here. Okay, just trying to see some questions here. Okay, maybe some new people that I haven't. Okay, I got triggered with contamination OCD with mess outside my apartment. Before I learned about ERP, I purchased a cleaning mat to clean shoes when coming into my apartment. Should I not do that? Well, I think this is a great question, because when it comes to OCD, you have the rational side and you have the irrational side. Like, for instance, with contamination or germs or anything enveloped in that way. This got very confusing during COVID, especially, but it's like, so someone with OCD, so say you come from outside and you spend an hour, scrubbing your shoes or whatever the case is, but a long time. You spend a long time cleaning the floor or scrubbing your shoes, or, you're on the mat for an hour trying to clean your shoes. Whereas you have the opposite end, or the other side of things, where you're coming in, you're wiping your shoes on the mat, and then you're moving on with your day. So one, to me, is a problem. The other one is rational. There's a lot of rationale in OCD, and that's actually why it's OCD, because it takes it out of the rationale. So I hope that makes sense. But essentially, for instance, again, with washing your hands, it's like washing your hands after the bathroom. That's an ordinary thing people do, right? Now, I do want to do that. I'm going to wash my hands, for whatever, 20, 30 seconds after the restroom. And that's good. I think that's good. Now, if I'm washing my hands for 5 minutes, for 20, for an hour, that's a problem. But it doesn't take away from the fact that washing your hands is a good thing to do, but you're going into the irrational OCD realm. So what I would say here is, you might like a cleaning mat, and that might be okay. Now, if it ends up being a compulsion, if you feel that way, then that's where I think the decision would be made. It's a good question, though. Let's see here. Oh. Okay. Hi, Mick. I'm very sorry to hear this. So, what's the best form of immediate help for severe OCD, which has reached the point where one does not want to live? What can get you ready to start ERP? ERP and medication both take time to work. Yes, absolutely. And I think that this is really tricky. I'm so sorry that you're feeling this way. And, what I would say is if you feel like you're in any type of crisis, at any point and you just don't know where to turn or what to do, of course you want to call 911 if you feel like you're in danger personally. 988 is a newer the mental health kind of crisis line. I'm not sure if everyone's aware of that, but it just came out a couple months ago, and it's specifically for mental health support. So that's another great way to reach out for help in the moment if you are feeling severely in crisis and you're worried something's going to happen. I just want to make sure you stay safe, of course. So 988 is a really good crisis resource there. And then suicide prevention, of course, which that isn't only for suicide. So it's really kind of general crisis. It doesn't have to be that, oh, you feel like you're going to commit suicide. If you're just in a really bad place and you need someone to talk to, that's a good place to go as well. Just more immediate in that type of way. But what can get you ready to start ERP? Well, I think that there's a lot of things, and I think that's kind of a lot of times you might not feel ready for ERP because it's very hard. And I think when it comes to severity, I think what I would say is have a first session with an ERP specialist. Come to an OCD, schedule your first session, and when that therapist does their assessment, which I know can be scary, just being assessed, it's just, I don't know, it might not be the best thing. It always makes it made me nervous, but at the end of the day, it was what was needed. But your therapist will assess your symptoms and severity. So if your therapist feels like, okay, your OCD is so severe that you should be actually in more intensive, it might be outpatient care, could be inpatient, different recommendations. No one's forcing you to do anything, but depending on your severity, they're going to let you know that of, what, I think that we won't be able to give you as much time as you need here. Because we're not super intensive right now, when it comparison to higher levels of care like inpatient or intensive outpatient where you're working for hours a day on this type of thing. So your therapist is going to help you with that. And I thought that I was like this most severe ever coming into therapy here, but this therapy worked for me. And I didn't know if it would. I thought that I was just at this completely, honestly, like just couldn't be helped. I was past the point, but it wasn't true. And I was very surprised. So this could also be the place for you, and it could happen quicker than you may think. So I would definitely give us a call and learn more, Mick. Medication, that can also take time, but I think more so when it's like SSRIs. But maybe because, your anxiety is so high, maybe they would prescribe you something different that is not our therapist. We don't really prescribe medication, but if you were with a psychiatrist, maybe they would say, okay, we're going to start you on this, which is more kind of take as you need, for anxiety. And that could be more of immediate help, I don't know what's all out there. I know there's a lot of different options, but I think that there's ways that you can go about this, Mick, for sure. I would give us a call and learn more. If you can, have a first session with us and see what your ERP specialist says, because they're that like licensed, specialized expert, and they're going to point you in that they want the best for you. And whether that's staying with us or going somewhere else for more intensive care or a different type of care, it's going to be the best, best path for you to take so that you can overcome what you're going through. Yes. I wish you the best, Mick. Definitely give us a call if you can. All right. I see something here. I'm terrified of ERP, and I do want to speak to that because ERP is scary. It is very scary. I kind of touched on this earlier, but if I'm scared of a knife and I got to hold a knife and look at it, I'm terrified. This is what I avoid all the time. But what I will say is the first exposure I did wasn't just like holding that knife, because that's very intense. Your therapist is going to start you off lower intensity, because the goal is to raise your anxiety, but not so much where it's completely overwhelming, because you have to have an opportunity to work through that anxiety. So it's a really nice collaborative effort between you and your therapist to be like, okay, this is the fear. Say my fear is harm OCD and it's the knife. Well, what's the first thing that I could start with that's, that's scary, but not to where I'm like, just totally incapacitated with fear. So I would just say to everyone here, if that's what's kind of keeping you back, which is totally understandable, give it a try, because you're not going to be forced to do anything. It's going to be a nice collaborative effort. Your therapist is going to be like, all right, let's maybe try this. And you're going to be like, okay, sounds scary, but I think I can do it. I'm going to give it a go. And then maybe you do it, and then afterwards you're like, wow, I actually feel a little bit better. That's not as scary as it was before. Well, maybe the next day your therapist is like, all right, you're feeling good with that. Well, what about this one? It's like a notch up. It's more intense. What do you think about it? And you're going to be like, let's give it a go. And then you're going to try your best and you're going to see what happens. So that's really the flow of ERP, is starting lower level, lower intensity exposures with your fears. And you're going to be working your way up, kind of like a ladder. It's called a hierarchy, but you're going to work your way up and just learn and confront as much as you can. And that's kind of what I talk about when I say worst case scenarios, is you're kind of working your way up to those worst case, very scary, but once you confront that, there's not really more that can come at you, because if you're going worst case, you're really confronting what is the scariest to you. And so when that starts to become diminished fear, you can feel a little unstoppable in a way, which is where ERP can get pretty cool, when you really practice. Okay, Hannah, I just want to touch on that because we talked a little bit before, but okay, so you feel good during the session, but then outside the session, you feel so anxious and you're unable to do what we talk about. So it sounds like, you're very much struggling with compulsions in between sessions, and not being able to kind of confront that on your own. And that's, it's good that you recognize that, though. I'm sorry that that's happening, but try to work with your therapist on some sort of technique or some sort of help for you to be able to complete things on your own, because I'm going to say it a million times, but practice and consistency. So with you, feeling like you're unable to practice on your own and kind of implement, that, you're not quite able to stay consistent with it. And that's not your fault. You're trying your best for sure. But, if you can work with your therapist to do whatever you can to try and get yourself to be able to practice ERP outside of the session, that is really where things can start to change. And it might take time to get there. You're trying, you're doing your best, you're here, talking to all of us and, being vulnerable in this type of way. So you are doing your best. So just try not to get down on yourself for that, because I used to like, oh, I can't practice. Like I'm the worst, and it's like, that's not true. This is incredible mental energy and exhaustion and just determination here. And so, everyone give yourself breaks here and there, because we are all trying our best, like that phrase, like trying your best, doing my best. But yeah, Hannah, I would say, I wish that there was like a magic wand. But try to get into that with your therapist of like, why are you unable to do certain things on your own, and then what can you maybe tailor so that you can. But I think it's possible. I think you can do this, Hannah. But yeah, talk to your therapist and see. And then if you do have any other questions, I don't know if you're in therapy with us, hope so, but yeah, talk to your member advocates, message your member advocates inside the chat in the app, which if anyone didn't know, we are in the app. Messaging. If you are in therapy, you get member advocates. You don't have to engage with us, but we would love to hear from you. And just we send check-ins to make sure that you're doing all right. Because if you do have concerns or questions, that's when you can, come to us and we're there to help. Okay, so we have about 6 minutes left in our live tonight. So I just want to get to just kind of going through, just seeing if there's anything that I feel like would be very helpful for everyone. Okay. Got it. I'm just taking, I have the cancer and say that's the question. Just remember to use that resource. Okay. This is a great question, and I understand this. I'm sorry, but I do understand. So I love my member advocates, but most questions I ask they can't answer and say to ask a therapist. Yes, I understand that. What would be examples of questions to ask your member advocate to use that resource? So absolutely. What I would say is when it comes to, it's very tricky. I want to be completely transparent. The member advocate role, being a member advocate, someone with OCD, and it's very tricky because we are not licensed clinicians. So legally, and also we're not qualified or equipped, we cannot provide ERP guidance. I can't say do this exposure or this is how you should do this, or we can't say anything like that. And so that's why it gets very tricky. And we do hate to turn people away for a lot of things, but we just can't, answer it. And a lot of times too, we're very weary of reassurance. I'm not saying that that's what you do ever, but a lot of times we like to be careful with answering certain questions because, we might sense that it's a little reassurancy, which is tricky. Half the time when I'm looking for it, I don't even know. But member advocates, so just to explain our role for everyone here, we are mostly here to ensure that you are generally comfortable and happy with your therapy. So it's a bit different than peer support, because peer support is more so really kind of talking like deep level of like, this is how my OCD was, and really, really getting into the depths of like the specifics of, each other's OCD and stories and kind of what works, what doesn't. And, but as member advocates, we like to answer a lot of those questions in the beginning of your therapy. Like for instance, if you're, first time in therapy, you don't know ERP, you're wondering what recovery looked like, you want to hear our story, like we're happy to do all of that, of course, for sure, because we want you to feel comfortable going into therapy, and know that there is hope because, we got better here and we know you can too, and it's true. And that's why we're here. But we have to be careful of certain questions. But things that you can ask us are things like, I think it gets hard when it's like very exposure detailed because we just can't get too into the ERP itself. Like even examples, we don't want to give examples because we don't want to set expectations because, everyone's symptoms and triggers and exposures are going to be very different and they're going to work differently for them. But something, things that you can ask your member advocate is yes, certain things of like, what did recovery look like? Or, halfway through therapy, like how were you feeling? Like, did you progress? And then did you feel like you fell backwards again? I think kind of more so that are more like experience like, and I think and I know it's confusing, what we get a lot is a lot of more clinical, kind of therapist type questions that we wish we could answer. And that's why we do veer you back to your therapist a lot of times in that sense, if we feel like we're just kind of, we don't want to cross the line in that way, in regards to the actual therapy itself. So we're here more to talk about the experience. I hope that helps. But after your first session, once you really get into therapy, we do check in with you a few times, but to make sure that you're doing okay. If there's ever a point where maybe you have 3 sessions and you're like, this therapist, I don't know if they're the best fit for me for XYZ reasons, like, is there any way, we could talk about it and, kind of for things like that of, did you feel this way with your therapist? Like, they said this, like, what do you think about that? We want to make sure that you're comfortable and that you feel like you're on the right path, as you're moving through here. So that's really what member advocates are here for as a resource, is to be your point of contact if you feel like anything is not going well, and maybe you're just really incredibly struggling and you just want to know if we hit that point too in therapy or, kind of those things. I hope that helps. I know it's very difficult. I will say, not being a licensed clinician, but then speaking to, there's certain things, there's a lot of gray area. So I appreciate everyone's understanding there. We do try our best. Let's see. Okay. I'm just seeing if I can get one last question here. Okay. I'm so sorry to hear this, but I'm just a teen and frankly, I can't do therapy at the moment. I understand that. What can I do? My OCD is keeping me from enjoying life. I just can't do much anymore without therapy. I feel I don't have options. so sorry. I understand how it can be to not be able to get that help that you need, whether that's financially or whatever those reasons are. I know it's very hard. So what I would suggest is I would say really try and get into resources. There are a lot of really great books out there, and just articles, blogs. I mean, we have on our website, but there's just a lot of really good information. And I think that you could learn a lot and maybe even pick up some techniques that might help you, and of course, we do always suggest to work with a specialist. But if you can't do that, you're trying the best you can, you just want to be a little careful with things, if you are trying anything that is more exposure like, but you could learn a lot that may really help you. So I would say look into some different books. One book that I actually love is actually it's another our member advocate manager. Her name is Carrie Osborne. She is amazing, and she has OCD, of course. She actually wrote a book. And that's out there, and it's that's really good. So I would look into that. I think that's a great one. Let me just pull up. Let me see if I could pull up a link here, because that's a good one. And she's been through quite a bit. So that is called the I'm just gonna throw the name in here. Where are we at? Okay. So that is Carrie's book, The Obsessive Outsider. And she experienced just incredible, journey with OCD and everything that had happened. And I think that could be helpful for you. But yeah, look into books, resources. What is that podcast? There's a podcast with OCD. There's a really well-known podcast. I'm like blinking the name right now, but if anyone knows that, throw in the comments. It might be UK based if I'm thinking right, but really great podcast out there. What else? So those are a few things I would start with, for sure. Okay, right. Okay, I just caught this one. This is a very easy one. Can you do ERP on Zoom calls or only in person? For sure. You can do ERP through, we are all Zoom actually. No CD therapy is all teletherapy. So we are all through Zoom. Yeah, so it works incredible. It's actually really nice because you can take it wherever you want. Like for instance, if you get incredible OCD anxiety at the grocery store, well, hey, you take your therapist on your phone with you, Zoom on your phone, and they're guiding you through. It's actually really nice because you can go to those environments where OCD is the highest or happening. Okay, everyone, I'm going to wrap up just because we're at that time. I see people dropping off. Sadly, I know it's getting late for like East Coasters and all that. But thank you, everyone, for coming. I do want to say, check out our Instagram. It's OCD Awareness Month, and we're just really excited. And there's just a lot of different things going on. So check out our Instagram, because there's just different events and different things that you can join into. And especially if you can't get into therapy, those resources, I think, are so beneficial, again, to feel pulled out of the isolation and like you're not the only one going through this, because you're definitely not, even though it feels like that 99% of the time, but we're all in this together for sure. So yeah, check out the Instagram, please. If you're looking for just general education, check out the blogs, education on our website. So helpful. I learned a lot of new things that I didn't know prior, even when I was in therapy. So a lot of different subtypes that you can get acclimated to. And yeah, please give us a call. Oh, thank you, Ilyas. Ilyas works with us. I appreciate that. So yeah, if anyone needs anything, please give us a call. You book a free call on our website. Once you do have an appointment, your first session booked, that is when you have the ability to message with your member advocates. We would love to talk to you. We would love to get you more prepared, whether that's talking more about ERP, talking about our experience, we would love to encourage you to go on with therapy, because I know that it can change everything, so we're all here for you. Thank you, everyone, for joining again. And I hope everyone has a good night. And there will be another live tomorrow. Not sure who with, but someone will be back. Thank you, everyone, and good night.